Great. So welcome again. And here is what we're going to do today, and please keep the chat going. We're going to hear from faculty using innovative creative expression in the classroom. I'm really excited for you all to meet these two folks, learn how students have been inspired to get involved in civic issues in meaningful and joyful ways. We're going to engage the faculty with some Q&A time, so if you have any questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat. And then we're going to share some helpful, hands-on resources that you can utilize in your own work. And I'm happy to hand it over to Ariel.
Thanks, Crystal. Hey, everyone. I'm Ariel. I'm the Associate Director at Project Pericles. I'll talk more about us in a sec. But first, thank you for being here. It is a wild time to be alive and to take time out of your day to spend with us and to gather in community. There is so much chaos in the world, including most recently an active shooting at Florida State University that we want to acknowledge. The situation is still developing, but that's happening amidst a very challenging time. And it's actually impossible for us to be creative when your zones are being flooded and you're focused on surviving. So I hope that this can be a time for us to activate that part of our brain. I'm going to put my cognitive scientist hat on. We know that for creativity to thrive, we have to be centered and present and activate the part of our brain that does that. So our prefrontal cortex. So let's just take 2 or 3 seconds to take a deeper breath than you normally would. Feel the air against your nostrils and your chest rise and fall. So thank you for doing that. That one breath, that small exercise, has been helping me invite my creative brain into problem solving, and quiet some of the other parts of my brain a little bit so that we can absorb and address the massively complex and heartbreaking challenges that we're facing today. But today is not just because creativity is required for problem solving, it's also critical for joy. Many of us here identify as artists and creatives in our own way, and we just know how powerful creativity is for organizing, for civic leadership, but also collective joy. So it's with my great pleasure to work with C4AA to bring you this webinar. And thanks again for being here. I'll turn it to Crystal to talk more about C4AA.
Thank you so much for that, Ariel. That was really lovely. To formally introduce myself, though, I'm Crystal Barrett. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the programs manager at the Center for Artistic Activism, and we are a nonprofit that was founded in 2009. We help organizations, individuals, and faculty and students bring more creativity and innovation to their social justice and civic engagement work. And we do that through trainings, workshops, resources, research, and fellowships, and a lot more. We've been able to work on college and campuses and universities across the nation over the years, working with faculty and staff on creative civic engagement. And some of those folks are here. Thanks for being here. And last year, we ran our Unstoppable Voters Faculty Fellowship, which engaged a cohort of faculty nationwide to develop creative pro-voting campaigns on their campuses using our creative campaign framework. And the fellows represented a variety of institutions across the US, and they came from fields that were vastly different, some from art and design and theater, but also political science and clinical psychology. And they were from all kinds of states, Pennsylvania, Maine, Minnesota, Virginia, Louisiana, and Arizona. I'll put a link in the chat so you can read more about who those individuals are. And just a shout out to someone who's here, Brandon Bauer, for being a great co-leader on that faculty fellowship. Thank you, Brandon. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Ariel to give some information about Project Pericles, and then we'll get into hearing from our speakers.
To provide some quick context, we are a higher education nonprofit dedicated to advancing civic participation across college campuses. So we have faculty leadership programs, community engaged learning, and co-curricular initiatives. You can go to the next slide. So this is the consortium of our colleges, but we do work with others more broadly through our mini grant programs, and particularly our civic engagement resources. So I'll drop these in the chat after I speak, but we have civic engagement resources that faculty can draw upon and a mini grant program to support faculty, actually, and staff as well now, to enhance the activities they're doing on campus to really embrace civic engagement as a core part of learning outcomes. So, our speakers will, or Shannon will talk a little bit more about that because she was one of our fellows in our mini grant program. You can skip over to the next couple of slides, Crystal.
All right. So I think we're ready to hear from our speakers. And so today we have Shannon Zenner, Assistant Professor of Communications Design at Elon University, and D.T. Burns, Adjunct Professor of Theater at Point Park University. And we're going to start with Shannon. If you'd like to introduce Shannon, Ariel.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Shannon was one of our fellows who utilized the voter suppression modules to inform her work and design. I won't steal your thunder too much, Shannon, because you're going to talk about that. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks. Before I start, I just want to say I hope you enjoy my AI headshot. I've been joking with my students. I'm using them all over the place to see what people say if they notice. It's very funny to me who notices and who doesn't notice. But I'm just going to share my screen here to make sure that this shows up. Okay. And come down here to this. So let me start a timer just to make sure I don't do this wrong. How about if I push the right button? There we go. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep.
So there's a couple of ways that I introduce the project when I do it, and I do it different every semester. So when it's an election, which is generally every 2 years for one of the more national campaigns, I always do a voting poster. But I always start by talking about that this poster design for our students is going to be where we mix analog and digital because we're in a design program that's heavily digital. We're not a graphic design program in a um, art school. We're a design program and a communication school. We don't have any art space in this building. It feels very much like a comm school program. So when we do some of the pieces that I do in my projects, I'm really trying to spend time getting them to think about how they can do analog things. And now that's becoming even more and more important because of AI. So I start by always starting with some inspiration. And I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the inspiration I show the students. This is Stefan Sagmeister and Jessica Walsh, two designers that I admire greatly, who both work together. Some of their work can be pretty triggering, so I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. I'm going to show it in its full context so that you can see it, but I just want you to keep that in mind that to some people it can be a little powerful. So this is Stefan Sagmeister, who is from Austria. One of his fundamentally beginning pieces that he did. We always talk to the students about when they do these projects to think about how to bring the hand in. And I feel like there's nothing more important to do that with than when we're talking about how we can speak to people about social justice social causes, any kind of these messages, because we want to see the human behind all the stuff that we're doing. And Sackmeister is really brilliant at doing this. He finds ways to include like photography and elements in ways that are surprising and shocking. I saw him present this piece in Dallas at a session where he was talking about when they made it, he presented it to Adobe and it was all photoshopped out to show them what the idea was before they photographed it. And the Adobe folks said, "This is good. Let's just use this. We don't need to have a photography session." He was like, no, we really need it. So when he did it, he made sure to include his assistant in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. You can see him filling the coffee into each of the cups there. And then he talked about the experience of like the coffee leaking out of these paper cups and what that meant. And, my students, I think, again, live in such a digital world. It's easy for them to forget like how powerful this stuff can be. And this is probably one of the pieces that's most into I think that really kind of gets you in the gut that he did. So this was for an AIGA event at the Cranbrook School Academy of Art in Detroit. And he had his assistant, the same one that you saw in the picture before this, actually write this into his skin using a blade. And this is in the 90s. I think a little bit before, we're really talking about triggering as much as we are now. But I think that's also some of the point that was here. And every time I show it to the students, they have sort of the same look on their face that you guys do, right? Which is like, oh God, it's visceral. And I think that's really powerful, right? He didn't just do it in Photoshop. But he has a lot of fun with this kind of stuff too. So he wanted to show all the things that he would eat, or and like the waste that would be left over from a week's worth of being a participant in commercial society. When he talks about this, you can see him in a video talking about it. He talks about, look at how much weight I gained just in 1 week from eating all of this food. But again, if we didn't show the actual pieces, right, then it's not going to have as much of a profound effect. In this piece, he uses actual bananas, yellow and green bananas, to take this, and then over time, the bananas change colors, the text, the typography disappears, and the bananas become brown. And oops, I skipped ahead. And you can kind of see, it's hard to see here depending on how your contrast is on your screen, but the bananas that were green are now yellow. And so we have a different contrast, right? He also has fun in spaces that I think that are really cool and profound. This is called the Happy Show, which was in Philadelphia. And he really plays with this kind of stuff, but we also still see very hand done text, right? When the elevator opens, we get these kinds of effects that happen. As you go up and down stairs, the message here, don't expect people to change, right? Depending on what direction you go, if you're going down versus if you're going up, right? And if you're pedaling this bicycle, the text changes depending on the speed that you were going. And there were like instructions hand done at the steps that are really great here, until finally it says like seek discomfort. So for my students, I think it's really powerful for them to see people who are using, who are commercial designers, right? Sagmeister and Jessica Walsh, you see here, are both commercial designers who get paid to do work in commercial spaces. But then use that same kind of talent that they have, that same expertise and professional guidelines, to also then send out messages in their kind of own personal spaces. So for Jessica, she's spending a lot of time posting these things onto her Instagram, and I highly recommend you check out her firm. When she left, when Steven Sagmeister retired, before they were Sagmeister and Walsh, now she's just Ann Walsh. Which is really fun. So it's just ampersand Walsh. But she posts on her social media, on Instagram especially, which is where I pulled these from, a ton of examples of design with these types of messages in them. And I really love, again, that this is all photography. She's actually making these things. It's not fake. It's not AI. The pieces are actually each of them individually made and photographed in her studio. And I think about working there, right? If I'm working there and I'm having to work on selling soda, but then the next day I get to come in and wrap my boss in bubble wrap for a message, like, to me, I think there's something really cool about that. And that's the kind of thing I'm trying to get the students to do. So when it came time to do the election posters that I did with Project Pericles, I wanted to show the students this stuff, but then I also gave them the assignment that they had to include analog elements in the pieces that they made. And so I'm going to show you those right now. So what we did was we used the money to make posters and print those posters and then hang them out all over our county area, and just kept with a really simple, just vote kind of messaging. So the students also did this as part of the AIGA's Get Out the Vote campaign. So we mixed the Project Pericles and the AIGA, plus some on-campus at Elon sort of pieces for the students to do this. And so they then had to build them out, but then we photographed them on campus where they were hung up all over. They hung in other places. Some of the students continued, the same student that you saw just then. She created a full series and looked at how to like bring paint elements in. Some explored typography in ways that I thought was interesting. The one on the left was really cool too. The student, she did it all digitally, then printed it on paper, and then rephotographed that paper after cutting it out. So again, these little imperfections that show up are part of what's really so compelling about this. Some students later, like the one on the right, you can see brought in like an actual pencil and an eraser and then photographed it that way so that you could see those sorts of pieces to it. But I do this project every semester in other ways too. So the one that I'm doing right now is where students are using this to talk about a social good message. In this case, the student decided to talk about microplastics in the ocean. And she spent a lot of time looking for stuff to inspire her, but then went in and even used ChatGPT, ironically, to like come up with headlines to use, and then commented on that and wrote about that. She did some hand done work too, but then photographed in textures, which was really fun for them because they just don't really play that way because again, they're not in an art school. Used Photoshop then to convert those into something digital and created a full campaign. This semester, the same students are doing this, but I've changed the target audience and I'm using the Unleashed piece from you guys, and they are very excited about having that to help them with process and guide them because they're having to speak to children. So we're doing it for elementary school age kids, and they have to convert this messaging to speaking to an elementary school age kid. And we're going to hang them up at the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools, elementary schools, and let those kids engage with the pieces and give them feedback. And we're leaving a way for the students to actually give that feedback and react to it. And then our students will then react back to it next semester. So I think like those are the kinds of things I'm interested in. Okay, I'm all done. But before I leave, I wanted to just make a pitch for this as well. I'm a member of the AIGA's design educators community, and it's something I'm passionate about as much as I've really enjoyed working with Project Pericles. I think it's something else you guys can think about doing. And maybe if you have a project like what you guys have done, it's something that if you could support through either of these amazing organizations, you can present at this conference. So I'm going to share the link for the Weave conference for you guys to check out. And thank you so much. I'll let DT take over now.
Thank you so much, Shannon. How just thought-provoking and wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna share this as we introduce DT. Can you all see my screen okay? Great. So again, happy to introduce DT, adjunct professor of theater at Point Park University in Pennsylvania. DT was an Unstoppable Voters faculty fellow with the Center for Artistic Activism last year and did some really amazing and fun creative work with their students. I'm really excited for DT to share these images and stories with you. And DT, I will stop sharing again though so you can take over.
Right, hello everyone. It has been a minute since I have shared my screen here. All right, here we are. All right, so I've been teaching theater at Point Park for the past couple of years. I specialize in puppetry and playwriting, and I was really excited to be part of a cohort of faculty who are looking at incorporating artistic activism into their syllabi for all of their different creative classes. So I teach at a theater conservatory, so I'm much more on the analog side of the arts world than our previous presenter. So it's been really fun for me of finding like what it is that gets people engaged and excited in the room, and then how I can share that both in person and digitally. So last year was part of my work with the program officially, and I worked on a lot of different kinds of projects trying things out. And to sort of start us off, I feel like teaching creativity to college students involves, at least in my approach, a certain level of chaotic good. So if those of you who aren't familiar with this, chaotic good is one of the sections of an alignment chart from role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons, where you sort of figure out what type of moral decisions you make along the way, and looking at making change for good, but understanding that college students sometimes need a little bit of a creative spark or something of not feeling like, especially in an academic context, like what they're being asked to do is just like routine or part of an assignment, of how they can really bring themselves to the job. Because one of the things that really drew me to this term was when I started teaching, of realizing how many of them are interested in like tabletop role-playing games, something that was popularized in the 1980s when it was really invented, and that now a lot of students are circling back to it and finding this thing where it's really based on like coming together as a community and working to solve problems creatively and collectively, which is exactly what I'm trying to do as an artist and activist. So when I realized that was something they latched onto, I started using those concepts in a lot of how I built creative class plans for them. So one of the first things that really jumped out to me is the concept of railroading, and that is in a game where you sort of have set tracks, where you have an expectation of everything is going to go the way that you as like the storyteller have planned it. And this is something that I found in particular for trying to help students engage with projects, that they have a very strong radar for this, and they can tell when you're trying to get them to make the thing that you want them to make. And so a lot of my approach was, how can I make it so they feel like there are, elements that they have control over, and how they can really bring themselves to the project, that they know that it's theirs rather than just something they're having to do for a class. So the elements of gamification that I brought in, that one of the tools is much like D&D, that I use dice-based prompts. I have some things where they can really see that there are elements of an assignment that are coming from a true sense of chance, that it's up in the air what it'll be, and they are surprised sometimes by the sort of things they're asked to do. I do sometimes let them, tweak things so they can make something more to their liking, but they can tell that I'm not pushing them into doing something in a particular way. So a lot of these things are like bonus achievements and extra credit assignments, but I did bring these in especially spring 24, of giving students some elements of random in their classes. So for intro to performance studies, where I sort of had some of my most fruitful projects, when we got to a section of sort of giving them a chance to plan out a creative campaign, like some of the things that C4AA has in their toolkits. That one was bring in, from all the curriculum we had covered so far, picking what sort of medium they had and what sort of engagement angle they were going to take. And I split them into 4 different groups. I had a class of about 25 students, and one of the things here is I put them all in different rooms for this assignment, so they weren't sort of falling into the groupthink mindset where everyone sort of sits back and lets there be a group decision made, and then everyone follows it along, and it becomes a little bit watered down, of like, oh, this is making a decision by committee rather than letting them bring their particular quirks and ideas forward. So working in small groups, this prompt led to there was an idea for getting hot twunks to give political advice while holding cute puppies on live TikTok feeds, and another one that involved setting off fireworks on the top of a pretzel stand. Like, they were really just spitballing with different ideas. But one that came forward through this that really stuck was Reggie the Point Park pierogi. So Pittsburgh, if you're not familiar, has a tradition of having giant pierogies, which are like local food staple. And in every baseball game, they all race around the field. So this came out of one of the materials that we had from C4AA, of identifying specific local traditions and culture to really tap into, that people can feel a campaign is coming from local culture. It also draws on the idea of irresistible image, that really locking into something that if you saw it, you would want to come and figure out more and ask what's going on, as well as just something that the students got really excited about it and thought it would be fun, and they presented it to everyone else, and everyone in the room went, yeah, that sounds fun. What if we had a giant pierogi who helped people figure out how to vote, where to vote, and gave them reminders online of all of the deadlines coming up? So the students pitched this idea, and everyone was so on board with it. We reached out and we got funding to actually acquire a giant pierogi costume. And over the next semester, so they designed this in spring 24. We planned it over the summer, and then all fall they were working under a little supervision from me, but mostly on their own to bring the pierogi to different events, to do tabling, it did interviews with the campus newspaper and made a surprise appearance on a local TV spot, participated in parades around town, and ended up having a reach of thousands of people, both online and in person at events. It was really exciting to see sort of when the students locked into this project, that they were really able to run with it for something that I could never have like planned or given them, but by letting them have the chaotic structure to find what it is that was exciting to them, they had something that made everyone around town who saw it stop and ask questions. And since then, the students involved in it, everyone who's really gotten that chance to make something their own, I've noticed that they've started bringing this forward in work in other classes and in professional endeavors outside of the school. So some of these same students, that a recent project they did of tapping into irresistible image was they created a project to highlight the necessity of still working to make improvements in the school for how many students of color they were admitting and providing scholarships for. So this image was a project that they made that in a single image captures sort of out of the entirety of the conservatory, highlighting how many people are people of color within the student body and how much work there is still to do there. So it's been really inspiring to follow along with that with them. 2025 has been a very different feel. So I've been working on finding some different tactics and approaches for what the students are needing now, and in an off year for elections, what it is that can both help them engage and find meaningful ways to connect to art and activism. So I've seen a lot of branching interests moving in different directions now, that rather than having a singular goal of get out the vote, that there's been sort of many different issues that students are motivated to try to make changes in, especially when everything in the world is feeling a little on fire and everyone is caught up in the constant seeming series of obstacles and things that they're running into. How do we find a way to sort of pull them into a positive art-making, creative spirit, trying to make changes for good? One thing that came up in our discussions too, of trying to like give them assignments to help them make these changes, especially when they're seeing so many other people not making enough of a difference from their perspectives, that it felt a little like, I don't know if you're familiar with Ender's Game, but it's a sci-fi franchise where human adults are recruiting children to fight the world's wars and solve its problems through a series of games in school, where they're sort of putting all the responsibilities on, in these books, 6 to 8 year olds, but to solve all their problems for them. And so students were also just commenting that it can be really hard, that if they're seeing leadership not make the decisions they want, but somehow they're supposed to solve them through their homework. So finding a way to make that fun has been a challenge. But I've had a chance to be making some cranky machines with them in a visual narratives course. These are sort of an analog, old school art where you have a physical scroll of images that moves through a screen to tell a story visually. And as I was having students work on them, one student said, oh, like, I know you're having it all scroll sort of left to right, but I really want to design this in a way that it goes vertically, like cartoonists that I follow on Instagram, that I really like their work in that format. And that immediately sparked something that we started discussing in class, of trying to put together a device that was like that, but in an iPhone format, and working to sort of find a way to make change for social good, and ended up coming up with a doom scroller. So this device, I have the physical one here, but that it works in the same format, but just basically replacing the phone in your hand and giving you something that you can make, where on the scroll it's formatted so you identify the problem that you're solving, that you might be scrolling on your phone reading about, proposing what it is you'd like to do to change it, and then drawing a series of just anything, any creative solution that you could have. It doesn't have to be plausible or realistic, but sort of giving people a chance to illustrate and highlight what it is they would like to be doing differently. And this is a project that we found really gives everyone a chance to identify the individual thing they want to change, have something cathartic, and pulling them out of the feeling of helplessness and just having something tangible that they can draw it out, they can share it with their friends, make a funny thing. And because it's already formatted in vertical format, you can film it right off of your phone and immediately put it on your social media to share it with your friends. So that is sort of my most recent discovery in terms of having some projects in this field. And I think I'm at my time, so I'll hand it back over to you all.
Thank you so much, DT. I am so inspired by both you and Shannon and everything y'all shared. Thank you so much. We are getting so close to our time together already, but we have a question that's come in, and I wonder if we could spend maybe up to like 5 minutes on this question. Both DT and Shannon, if you have some insight. What suggestions would you have for others who want to replicate these approaches in their classes or community groups?
One thing I would say, I didn't really get to talk about this much, is that both Project Pericles, I can speak more to that though, because that's what I've been using, have great resources that you can use for the students. So one of the activities I did with mine was from Project Pericles. It was here are 5 different people, and they have to, you get like a profile of who they are, and the students have to register them to vote. So they had to figure out and see what all the hurdles were for voting. So anything that's like role playing where they get to put themselves into the perspective of other people. My students at Elon University tend to be upper middle class, fairly well off. So hurdles are not something that they tend to, yes, thank you for sharing, Ariel. Tend to engage with on a personal level. So it was good for them to role play into that, right? And to see what maybe somebody in Maine is experiencing versus somebody where they're at. So that was really valuable. It really got them excited. So that works for me.
Yeah, no, that absolutely sounds great, and I'm always into role-playing tools for helping students connect. I think the other thing I'd say, I found it useful to put out a survey at the beginning of the class, both seeing if students were registered to vote, but also where they could put in identifying any obstacles they or their friends had in getting registered, or just things in their community that they were noticing. Like for a lot of them, they couldn't get off of class. And so even just identifying ways to make sure they get permission from instructors to have the time to vote, but getting a chance to gather information from them to even know what problems they're facing, rather than trying to hypothesize on my end what problems they might be needing to solve.
Great. Thank you both. I think we have a few more minutes for another question. What would you say has been like the biggest barrier, if any, to embedding creativity into your lessons? And if you've had any, how have you overcome them?
For me, it's the opposite. So the creativity is not always the problem. It's subject matter, right? So in this case, it's a design class. And so getting the students to be like, oh, we're going to talk about politics in my design class. I don't really want to do that, right? So finding the angle to get at, to be like, here's where this is, something that it ties in. So that's why I find like showing them what other people are doing who are professionals works as a great access for me. I'm sure there are plenty of other ways, but it's not that the creativity part.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in setting ground rules, both for that is like students frequently, once you give them permission to start being creative or playing, are very eager for it, but of knowing that I have them sort of take a promise at the beginning of class for community guidelines and being, kind and respectful to each other and to themselves, that feeling like they can take creative risks as well as expressive risks, especially for talking about politics, and finding ways to make sure that they feel safe to engage with matter, and know sort of rules of engagement for how to, discuss things without making it personal or taking things personally, and that having a space where once they can feel like they can take risk or be more dynamic in what they're doing, that really helps sort of then having them all engaging fully with any creative assignments.
Yeah, Leslie Haynes, who's here on the chat, has a really cool idea that she shared with me a while ago. That was she gives her students a certificate of to fail, like that gives them like their opportunity to fail. It's like this official looking certificate. It's so cool. So I think like things like that are great. I also try to do labor-based grading, so I don't grade the students on the final result. In my junior level class, which is the one where we do these projects, they're graded on process. So you need to do this many things. You need to do 20 thumbnail sketches. You need to bring in this many pieces of photography, this many analog elements. You need to spend this much time doing this. So there's a whole list and they get to choose from the list. So things like choice, that getting rid of the grade helps from my students to take risks that they wouldn't take otherwise because they're so worried about it being perfect or that, you know, it's going to be in my portfolio. And what if it doesn't look great? I'm like, you can't have that mindset if you're going to do something creative.
Minutes because we have some good questions in the chat, so maybe 2 more minutes if we could answer these. DT, you are a puppeteer, and Harry has asked, will you describe this, please? And then we also have another question. Do students ever not want to participate in the political aspect of the classes? Jen says, I teach art and struggle to get my students to engage in deeper themes.
Yeah, in terms of a puppeteer that I work, and a lot of it is object storytelling. So finding ways to sort of find iconic objects or elements of character in them, and then bring them into classes in different ways. So this is both. I do this in like visual narrative. I'm actually working with a design program at Carnegie Mellon this semester where we're doing some of that cranky work with the doom scrollers. But then also at a theater school that it is very much performance driven. So both finding objects that can become characters, working on all of the elements of breath, focus, and movement, as well as then creating stories that are more driven by like when there is a separation from a human performer into another kind of object, how that people can connect differently or have a different emotional response when it is an object or a puppet-based character. I think for political engagement, at least in my classes, I have found that sometimes, and a lot of it is, I think for any creative activism of trying to find something that the students do care about, that they're invested in and wanting to make a change in, and whether that is big or small, that I found once I get sort of a toehold in their interest of what do you want, what do you wish was different in the world, that it's then easier to connect that in and help them find a buy-in for realizing how much whatever it is impacts them. That is the same for non sort of major election years, that for local politics and getting them engaged with consistent civic activism of seeing how much of a difference, you know, the local city councils make in resources available for artists and those grants and things, that's sometimes a way for art students where I can say like, oh, this will make a difference in how you make your living right out of school. And as soon as they start seeing that, it's easier for them to find that angle.
Shannon, did you want to add anything to that last question?
Honestly, they said that so well. I don't know that I should, but I mean, I guess I will say that, Jen, I also have had that same experience where students are like, this is not something I care about. You know, I'm in my sorority and I want to talk about pretty beauty things or whatever it might be. Which is why I think, you know, sometimes not using the word political, talking about it being about social justice and action, and then helping them to figure out what that might be. So like even now doing the one with kids, some of the themes that we brainstormed were things like brushing your teeth, right? That can be a message that's worth putting out there, right? That's about social good. It doesn't have to be political per se. And then the voting posters we did were, I specifically said they had to be apolitical. So it was about getting people to go vote and not about who they voted for. But that doesn't mean I think they can't be political. I think there's opportunities for that too. But I think where they feel like what they're doing can affect change, so there's a reason for it. And so I think that's important too. I haven't had a super success with that, as many opportunities, but I'd like to. So
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm just going to share, we just have a couple more minutes left. If folks are able to stay on after, I invite you to, and hopefully we can continue some conversation because I do see some other questions coming up. But we do want to leave you with some resources for those who do need to leave on time. Ariel, would you like to talk about some of the Project Pericles resources?
Yeah, I mean, I dropped them in the chat, and Shannon did an amazing plug talking about some of the ones that she's drawn upon. But beyond voting, we also have modules on deliberative dialogue discussions, actual slides on just like how to vote and why voting matters, as well as a database that catalogs how faculty and staff have used this. So we invite you to check that out. I'll drop that one more time in the chat.
Thank you. And some resources from the Center for Artistic Activism. We have a book called The Art of Activism written by our co-founders, and we also have a creative campaign toolkit. Excuse me, both are full of different case studies, fun exercises, really practical things you can implement into your own work. So I will also put those in the chat, and I'll put a link to sign up for our newsletter as well, so you can just stay up to date on any more events like this we're doing or other resources we're putting out. And you can download the toolkit for free at that link there. We also have office hours every Friday, or sorry, the last Friday of each month. You can sign up for a short meeting to talk about upcoming projects, brainstorm ideas with us, ask us questions, anything you have going on, you can come in and talk to us about that. So I will put that link in the chat as well. And then the last thing we'll leave you with is we have a brief survey. Ariel, if you want to go over this.
Yeah, well, I will drop it in the chat, unless breaking right now. But we would love to get your feedback on this. Actually, this is maybe the third or fourth webinar that we've partnered with on C4A. Would love to hear what was helpful about this, but also so that we can be more responsive in the future and bring this amazing community together to learn from each other.
Yeah, and very exciting, complete the brief survey for a chance to win a hard copy of the Unleash Unstoppable Voters, a creative campaign toolkit, which again, you can download for free, but if you want that chance to win a hard copy, please fill out our survey. And thank you all so much. Here is me and Ariel's contact. Please stay in touch with us if anyone can stay on and wants to chat. I know I have some time, but thank you all again for being here. It was really lovely, amazing to hear from DT and Shannon. And thank you all for the work you're doing. You are working so hard, and we really see that and honor you. Thank you.
Hey, great job. Thank you.
Is there a link to the survey in here?
Yes, I will put it in the chat again for you, Harry. Thank you. There it is again in the chat.
Thank you.
There was a hand raised earlier, so I don't know if that person has a question, but I'm happy to stay if you